I believe that education holds the key to a bright future, not only in transforming lives, but in helping communities to see their power to shape the world. Muktangan stands at the forefront. We have dedicated ourselves to unlocking the true potential within every child, teacher, and parent. At the heart of this our educational journey lay the possibility of a powerful synergy, a harmonious connection between the teacher, the child, the parent, and the community.
Over the years, we have developed into an integrated teacher and school education model. Every year, thousands of children thrive, benefiting from holistic learning experiences. Our commitment to excellence is evident in the impressive school pass percentage, averaging at an astounding 99% over 10 years of SSC examinations. The impact continues even after school, with 98% of our alumni pursuing higher education and becoming productive contributors to society. We try to achieve harmony with global goals and national policies. A significant number of points mandated in policy documents like the NEP 2020 have already been pioneered, adopted, and illustrated in the Muktangan model.
Our impact extends beyond our classrooms. Through our outreach project, we have developed a strong partnership with the BMC and VS NGO and academic organizations.
As a Muktangan teacher, when I first I gave this to work with school, teach them about foundation, literacy and numeracy skills. When I started taking videos, tasks were fine. But later on, when I took the activities of literacy and numeracy, parents participated in the activity and they understood the importance of education in their child.
As we gaze upon the future, let us forge ahead, hand in hand. Join us on this extraordinary journey as we continue to make a difference. Every child, every teacher, and every parent has a role to play. Let's unlock boundless potentials and create a world where education knows no boundaries. Fostering this engagement is not just a choice, it is an imperative if we seek to kindle flames of transformation.
We invite you to join hands with us to grow and spread our experiences and learnings with other communities and partner organizations. Your support will enable thousands of other children to realize their fullest potential. Thank you for your support.
Welcome everyone. We are so glad to have you join us today for this exciting and thought-provoking webinar on shaping learning environments where pedagogy meets excellence. The way we teach is deeply connected with the environment in which students learn. The learning environment plays a crucial role in shaping students' physical, cognitive, emotional, and social development, especially as we face the challenges of rapidly changing world. This webinar seeks to inspire and equip educators to transform classrooms into vibrant spaces where learning flourishes and every student is empowered to achieve their potential. So before we begin, I would like to share some rules, requesting all the participants to stay on mute all the times. Please do keep your videos on. It helps in engagement. Kindly share your suggestions, feedback in the chat box. We shall take a few questions, if any, during the last 10 to 15 minutes of the webinar. So please do stay with us till the end. Requesting you to kindly mention your name and organization along with the question. So in our previous webinar, we looked at leadership as a core component of achieving school excellence. And now we shall explore more about the role of transformative learning environments. It gives me immense pleasure to introduce our esteemed panel speakers who bring in a wealth of experience and insight into today's session. We have with us Ms. Shikha Dutt, Ms. Rashmi Jejurikar, Ms. Zainab Bhinderwala, and Ms. Bandana Basu, who's our first speaker. Ms. Bandana Basu is an educator who has contributed towards the development and well-being of children in many ways, but primarily through education. Her career spans nearing 3 decades in schools across national and international boards such as CAIE UK and the IBO Switzerland. Apart from being a teacher, she has also been an international teacher trainer, a school auditor, and an education consultant. She has collaborated and contributed in Tree Nation Educational Research Project conducted by Education Development Trust, a UK-based not-for-profit organization that was simultaneously piloted in Egypt, India, and Kenya. And her articles on education have been published in international educational journals as well. She has co-founded Shishyaa Waldorf School, which is an alternative school that is unique because of its educational philosophy and methods. Alongside, she has also published a collection of children's poems, In My Heart Plays a Song. Now I invite Ms. Rahi Dahake, our facilitator, to lead the discussion.
Thank you, Kiran. We are so happy to join you all in interacting with this wonderful panel of speakers. This second Muktangan webinar, which is a part of our series of 3, seeks to inspire and equip educators to transform classrooms into vibrant spaces where learning flourishes and every student is empowered to achieve their potential. We hope to have an enhanced understanding of the role of pedagogy and learning environments in achieving educational excellence in today's webinar. This exchange of innovative practices and strategies would contribute a lot to improving teaching and learning, and also develop a strengthened network of educators and stakeholders who are committed to advancing school education. Let us start with our first speaker, Ms. Bandana Basu, as we look forward to actionable insights for creating inclusive, engaging, and future-ready educational systems. I would like to start the first conversation with Ms. Basu with a question. How do we create innovative schools and education systems? Over to you, Ms. Basu.
Thank you for the question. Good afternoon, everyone, and आप सबको मेरी तरफ से नमस्ते. जब हम स्कूल्स की बात करते हैं और उसके साथ जब हम इनोवेशन की बात करते हैं, कहीं पर हमें लगता है कि ये दोनों शब्द बहुत एक दूसरे से अलग-अलग हैं. लेकिन if we start questioning ourselves कि एक्चुअली स्कूल्स का रोल क्या है, तो वहां से अगर हम इस कॉन्वर्सेशन को शुरू करते हैं, तो आई थिंक ये कॉन्वर्सेशन बहुत अलग तरह से निखर के बाहर आ सकता है. I will start my presentation, but I want to begin by asking this question कि यहाँ जितने लोग present हैं उनमें से कोई बता सकता है कि आपके सोच के अनुसार स्कूल क्या जगह है? What is a school? And if you can start posting it in the chat, I will take it up from there.
Hello. Hello.
Hello.
Yeah, my name is Mayur from Catalyst for Social Action. So as per your question, so the meaning of school, there were to give the freedom for explore what they want.
Okay. I think that's a very good way to put it together. Anyone else would like to say something? Well, okay. In the interest of time, I think I'll take this forward. Is the presentation available to everyone? Are you able to see the screen?
Yes, and we also have 2 questions which are in the 2 comments in the chat. One is that it's a place that provides learners to experiment and learn, and it's a safe space where they learn about their environment. There's another comment
Wonderful.
that it is schools are for education to develop life skills. So these are 3 comments. It's a learning place. That's another comment that we've had here.
Yes. Thank you. I'll take it forward now. Thank you for your comments, but if I can just go ahead. Most of you have really covered it well, and I hope that by the time we finish my sharing, सबके साथ हम एक मत होकर एक चीज के बारे में, स्कूल के बारे में सोच सकते हैं. It is a place for children to experience who they are. एक ऐसी जगह जहां वो खुद को भी पहचान पाए, खुद को समझ पाए, खुद के अंदर वो जो महसूस करते हैं उस चीज को भी एक्सप्रेस कर पाए, जता पाए. इट इज ऑल्सो अ प्लेस जहां वो जो जानते हैं उससे और ज्यादा जानकारी दुनिया से ले पाए. हम सबके पास हमारे पेरेंट्स हैं, रिलेटिव्स हैं, किताबें हैं, लेकिन कुछ इससे भी ज्यादा हमें जानना होता है, और तब जाके हमें टीचर्स की जरूरत होती है जो इन सब्जेक्ट्स के बारे में स्पेशलाइज्ड इंफॉर्मेशन रखते हैं. और ये स्कूल एक ऐसी जगह है जहाँ पे ये हम कर पाते हैं. यही वो जगह है जहाँ बच्चे कुछ नए ख्वाब देख सकते हैं, अपने बारे में, अब दुनिया के बारे में कुछ नई सोच इकट्ठा कर सकते हैं, एंड वो ये भी पहचान पाते हैं कि वो किस चीज में माहिर हैं. एंड होपफुली बाय द टाइम दे लीव स्कूल हम उनको ये दिखा पाते हैं कि वो क्या कर पाते हैं, कर पाएंगे और अच्छी तरह से कर पाएंगे, जहां जाके दे कैन बिगिन टू कंसिडर व्हाट स्पेशलाइजेशन दे वुड लाइक टू गो अहेड विथ. अब स्कूल के साथ जो एक बात जुड़ी हुई है वो है पेडागॉजी. पेडागॉजी का मतलब क्या होता है, यहाँ भी फिर थोड़ा सा मैं किसी का इनपुट लेना चाहूंगी. Raki, if you see any comments, please share.
Yes, I will. Effective teaching techniques is one.
All right.
Art of teaching.
Right. More or less सबको ये समझ में आता है and पता भी है, because we are in a circle of educators, के pedagogy का मतलब है the study of the methods and approaches जिसका हम use करते हैं बच्चों को पढ़ाने के लिए. लेकिन एक पेडागॉजी का अपना एक तरीका होता है. हम जो अप्रोचेस अडॉप्ट करते हैं ये अप्रोचेस रैंडम नहीं होते हैं. इसकी एक विचारधारा होती है, इसकी एक सोच एंड एक दिशा होती है. और वो क्या हो सकता है, नॉर्मली ये जो पेडागॉजी हम अडॉप्ट करते हैं ये एक समझबूझ के साथ जुड़ा हुआ होता है कि बच्चों को पहले से क्या पता है. वो खुद जब स्कूल में आते हैं उनके बैकग्राउंड में से उनके पास कोई ना कोई प्रीवियस नॉलेज होता ही है. फिर हम ये जानते हैं कि आगे चलते बच्चों को क्या जानना जरूरी है, तो वो गोल्स हो गए. फिर हम ये सोचते हैं कि ये जो जानना जरूरी है, जो गोल्स है, इनको अचीव करने के लिए हम किस तरह के एक्टिविटीज का इस्तेमाल करें ताकि ये वहां तक पहुंच पाए जहां हम इन्हें ले जाना चाहते हैं. और इसके आगे भी एक बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट चीज है कि सिर्फ वो एक्टिविटीज में इन्वॉल्व होके तभी के लिए ना बता पाए या सीख पाए, बट इसको आगे चलते रिटेन कर पाए और फ्यूचर में जब जरूरत पड़े इसका इस्तेमाल कर पाए. अब एक नई वर्ड के साथ हम स्कूल को देखेंगे और ये शब्द है ऑल्टरनेटिव. आज हम इनोवेटिव स्कूल्स के बारे में बात कर रहे हैं, तो यहाँ पे ऑल्टरनेटिव शब्द का इस्तेमाल हो रहा है. Anybody would want to try what does an alternative school mean? आपके ओपिनियन में ऑल्टरनेटिव स्कूल का मतलब क्या होता है? Is there anything there?
There's one comment which says, does other activities, or it's a second choice.
ओके मैं यहीं पे इस डिस्कशन का नई शुरुआत करूंगी. अनफॉर्चुनेटली ऑल्टरनेटिव स्कूल्स वो स्कूल्स हैं जो अलग तरह से पढ़ाते हैं और ये मेन स्ट्रीम नहीं है. मेरे सोच के अनुसार बाय द टाइम हम ऑल्टरनेटिव स्कूल को समझ पाए, हमें ये लगने लगेगा कि शायद इसी को मेन स्ट्रीम होना चाहिए. तो जरा देखते हैं कि ऑल्टरनेटिव स्कूल्स किसे कहते हैं. इट इज अ स्कूल वेयर the pedagogy grows out of a philosophy that is the source of all thinking. आज तक जितने स्कूल्स हम जानते हैं, मेन स्ट्रीम स्कूल्स के बारे में मैं बात कर रही हूँ, वहां पे जनरली एक क्वालिफिकेशन हमारी विचारधारा होती है कि ये बोर्ड एग्जाम के लिए पढ़ रहे हैं, ये बोर्ड है, इसका ये सिलेबस है, इसका ये एग्जाम है, इसके ये पास पेपर्स हैं, इसका ये गाइड है, इसका इस तरह से प्रिपरेशन करना है, और फिर बोर्ड एग्जाम लिख के बच्चे बाहर आ जाएंगे। लेकिन ऑल्टरनेटिव स्कूल्स उन स्कूल्स को आज कहा जाता है जहां पे ये बोर्ड एग्जाम से थोड़ा हट के हम इंसान की तरफ ध्यान देते हैं। ये जो शिष्य है, जो बच्चा है सामने, ये एक इंसान है, और ये जो फिलॉसफी होता है, बेसिकली ये नजरिया है कि अगर हम एक बच्चे को पढ़ा रहे हैं तो ये बच्चा है कौन, और हम क्या चाहते हैं इस बच्चे के फ्यूचर में, जब वो एक बड़ा इंसान होके इस दुनिया में अपने आप को शामिल करेगा, इस दुनिया में अपने कर्मों को डिलीवर करेगा, तब वो कौन होगा, होगा, कैसा होना चाहिए। इस विचारधारा से जब हम एक पेडागॉजी को ग्रो करते हैं, इस तरह के स्कूल्स को हम ऑल्टरनेटिव स्कूल्स बोलते हैं। यहाँ का अल्टीमेट गोल ये होता है कि जो इंसान हो वो सिर्फ पढ़ाई नहीं, बट हर तरह से एक अच्छा इंसान बनकर उभरे। यहाँ हम बच्चों के अंदर ह्यूमन वैल्यूज एंड प्रैक्टिसेस को इनग्रेन करने की कोशिश करते हैं। एकेडमिक्स तो है ही, पर इसके साथ हम ह्यूमन वैल्यूज एंड प्रैक्टिसेस, जैसे इंसानियत जिसको कहते हैं, भलाई जिसको बोलते हैं, सच बोलने की क्षमता, करेज, निडरता, इन चीजों के बारे में भी हम बहुत सी चीजें कोशिश करते हैं कि उनके अंदर हम निखार पाएं। इसका जो करिकुलम होता है, ये एकेडमिक्स के साथ साथ इस तरह डेवलप किया जाता है कि ये जो ऊपर कही बातें हैं वो इसके अंदर इनग्रेन हो जाएं। Emotional health and well-being of the student is just as important as the academic qualification. हम ये नहीं सोचते कि academic qualification important नहीं है, लेकिन हम ये जानते हैं कि सिर्फ academic qualification अगर emotional health and well-being के बिना आए तो वो इंसान, आई थिंक, सोसाइटी में एक प्रॉब्लम बन के भी खड़ा हो सकता है। इसलिए इमोशनल हेल्थ एंड वेलबींग बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट है। आई थिंक आज हम सब जानते हैं कि आईक्यू के अलावा ईक्यू, इमोशनल कोशेंट, एक बहुत बड़ी जगह बना चुकी है। एंड उस हिसाब से अगर हम देखें तो स्कूल ही वही जगह है जहां पे हम इसको अच्छी तरह से शेप कर पाएंगे। अब एक बहुत दूसरी बड़ी बात है लर्निंग एनवायरनमेंट। जब हम आज का डिस्कशन शुरू किए, हमने कहा कि लर्निंग एनवायरनमेंट और इसमें इनोवेशन, लेकिन एनवायरनमेंट हम कहते किसको हैं? एनवायरनमेंट, स्पेशली लर्निंग एनवायरनमेंट, ये एक ऐसा इकोसिस्टम है जो बिल्कुल अपने आप काम करता है, इस तरह से कि इसमें पार्टिसिपेट करने वाले हर इंसान का एक दूसरे के साथ एक बहुत सहज आदान प्रदान होता है, और इस आदान प्रदान के चलते दोनों ही ग्रो करते रहते हैं। तो अ लर्निंग एनवायरनमेंट हैज टू बी अ symbiotic relationship where both participants are enriched. इस तरह के ऑल्टरनेटिव स्कूल का, इनोवेटिव स्कूल का जो लर्निंग एनवायरनमेंट है, इसके लिए कुछ बहुत जरूरी एलिमेंट्स हैं। वो ये हैं कि नॉलेज इज क्रिएटेड बाय द लर्नर एंड नॉट डाउनलोडेड बाय द टीचर। ये बिल्कुल अलग नजरिया है। टीचर को पढ़ाना है, लेकिन सिर्फ टीचर पढ़ाए और पढ़ाई हो जाता है, ये नहीं है। जो पढ़ रहा है उसको अपना लर्निंग खुद क्रिएट करना होता है। इस लर्निंग को क्रिएट करने के लिए जो पहली जरूरत है, उस लर्नर की रिसेप्टिवनेस है। उसकी इच्छा होनी चाहिए कि मैं पढ़ूं, मैं सीखूं, और ये होने से ही पार्टिसिपेशन मिलेगा। द पेडागॉजी, जो हमारा टीचिंग मेथोडोलॉजी होना चाहिए, वो ऐसा होना चाहिए जो इस बच्चे को पहचाने, उसके अंदर की भावनाओं को समझकर एक ऐसा पेडागॉजी बनाए ताकि वो बच्चा बहुत आसानी से अपने आप को लर्निंग की तरफ खिंचता हुआ फील करे। The lesson is engaging and interactive to encourage participation. वो लेसन ऐसा होना चाहिए, उसकी एक्सपीरियंस ऐसी होनी चाहिए कि बच्चा बहुत ही ज्यादा एक्साइटेड फील करे कि मुझे आना है, मुझे करना है, मुझे सीखना है। आइडियली उम्र के हिसाब से देखें तो छोटी उम्र में टेक्नोलॉजी का बहुत ही कम यूटिलाइजेशन होना चाहिए, और बड़े उम्र में जब बच्चे टेक्नोलॉजी को अच्छी तरह से समझ पाए, उसके इस्तेमाल का, उसके अच्छे और बुरे प्रभाव का समझ वो पा लें, तब इसका यूटिलाइजेशन बढ़ाना चाहिए। तो यहाँ से हम शुरू करते हैं एक नया एक्सपीरियंस। जैसे कि आपने सुना होगा, आई एम द को फाउंडर ऑफ अ शिष्या वर्ल्ड ऑफ स्कूल। ये एक वर्ल्ड ऑफ स्कूल है, ये वाशी में है, और ये ऑल्टरनेटिव स्कूल है। ऑल्टरनेटिव इसलिए क्योंकि ये जो मेथडोलॉजी है ये वर्ल्ड ऑफ एजुकेशन के तरह चलता है, और ये एजुकेशन की मेथडोलॉजी बिल्कुल अलग है। और अलग इसलिए है क्योंकि एक चीज जिसको बहुत ज्यादा यहाँ पे मूल्य दिया जाता है वो है द इनर वर्ल्ड ऑफ अ चाइल्ड। आमतौर पे हम बच्चे की बॉडी को देखते हैं, उसके हाइट को देखते हैं, बिल्ट को देखते हैं, उसके एज देखते हैं, और उसी से ऐसे अनुमान लगा लेते हैं कि ये क्लास के बच्चे को ये पढ़ना है, ऐसे पढ़ना है, इस तरह से करना है। लेकिन हम कभी ये ध्यान नहीं देते हैं कि एक बच्चे की भी एक इनर वर्ल्ड होती है, और इच्छा, वांटिंग, एनकरेजमेंट, एंथुजियाज्म, ये सारी जो शब्द हैं ये दिमाग में नहीं बैठता, ये दिल में होता है। ये इनर वर्ल्ड इस हार्ट वर्ल्ड, दिल के साथ जुड़ा हुआ है। तो अगर हम एक बच्चे की इच्छा को एंगेज कर पाए तो इससे बड़ा लर्निंग अपॉर्चुनिटी हम बच्चे को नहीं देते हैं, इससे बड़ा कुछ नहीं हो सकता। सो वी हैव टू लर्न टू एंगेज द फीलिंग वर्ल्ड ऑफ द चाइल्ड, जहां से वो अपने आप पढ़ाई की तरफ खिंचता जाता है। अभी जो थोड़े पिक्चर्स हैं ये आप देखेंगे, ये जर्नी हमने 10 साल पहले शुरू किया था। जब शुरू किया था तो ये जगह ऐसे एक एम्प्टी ब्लैंक स्पेस थी। हमने यहाँ पर आने के बाद एक ऑल्टरनेटिव स्कूल की तरह, छोटे स्कूल की तरह हमने शुरू किया था सिर्फ एक स्टूडेंट के साथ, और धीरे धीरे वहां पे हमने इस जो सॉइल का पैच था, नॉर्मली ये कवर हो जाएगा या फिर इसको कोई और चीज बना दिया जाएगा, हमने इसको एक छोटा फार्म बना दिया। एक बैकयार्ड फार्म बोल सकते हैं, जहां पे आप देख सकते हैं कि सिर्फ हमारे मेहनत से हमने इतना कुछ वहां पे क्रिएट कर दिया। अब ये क्यों जरूरी है? ये इसलिए जरूरी है कि बच्चे साइंस किताबों में सीखने से पहले एक्चुअली एक्सपीरियंस करके सीखें। ये जो छोटा सा एक कैटरपिलर आप देख रहे हैं, ये कैटरपिलर हमारे बच्चों ने इसके एग्स से शुरू करते हुए, कैटरपिलर को देखते हुए, कैटरपिलर पत्ता खाते हुए, वो कोकून बनाते हुए, और फिर बटरफ्लाई बन के बाहर, जब वो अपने क्राइसलिस को क्रैक करके बाहर आता है, ये पूरे स्टेजेस हमारे बच्चों ने देखा है। किताबों में जाने से पहले बच्चों ने अपनी आंखों से इसे देखा है, और एवरीडे आके जब वो देखते हैं, इसको परखते हैं, ये बिल्कुल एक अलग तरह का अनुभव और लर्निंग हो जाता है। हमारे प्री स्कूल में टेबल्स एंड चेयर्स नहीं होते हैं, वहां पे कोई फिनिश टॉय नहीं होता है, सिर्फ लूज पार्ट्स होते हैं। हमारा ऑल्टरनेटिव वे ऑफ लर्निंग में हमने इंस्टेड ऑफ एब्सोल्यूट वुडन फर्नीचर, हमने केन के फर्नीचर को इस्तेमाल किया है, क्योंकि केन का फर्नीचर लाइट होता है, कन्वर्टेबल होता है। आपने अपने घरों में जब छोटे बच्चों को खेलते देखा होगा, आपने देखा होगा कि वो टेबल के नीचे चले जाते हैं, कुर्सी को उल्टा कर देते हैं, दो कुर्सी के ऊपर एक चादर डालकर घर बना लेते हैं, क्योंकि उन बच्चों के उस उम्र में बच्चों की ऐसे ही इमेजिनेशन होती है और इच्छाएं होती हैं। तो हमारे लिए बच्चों को एंगेज करने के सब बच्चों को एंगेज करने का सबसे इम्पोर्टेंट तरीका है कि हम उनकी दुनिया में शामिल हो जाएं, उनकी दुनिया को हमारे एजुकेशन की दुनिया बना दे, और अब उनके साथ खेलते खेलते एजुकेशन को आगे ले जाएं। तो हमारे बच्चे आप देख रहे हैं कि वो गार्डन में जाके कोथमीर वगैरह लेके आते हैं, किचन में खाना बनता है, उसमें वो यूज करके वो लोग उस जो नाश्ता या खाना बना है वो खाते हैं। हमारे बच्चों को बिल्कुल बिल्कुल इंडिपेंडेंट बनाया जाता है। हफ्ते में एक दिन, एक पीरियड क्लास क्लीनिंग के ऊपर दिया जाता है, जहां बच्चे अपने कुर्सियां, टेबल साफ करते हैं, खिड़कियां साफ करते हैं, क्लासरूम को सफाई करते हैं, धोते हैं। जब कोई बच्चा सोशल साइंसेज में टाइप्स ऑफ हाउसेस पढ़ रहा होता है, तो आप देख रहे हैं कि वहां पे वो एक्चुअली वो हाउस बना रहा है। इस तरह से हर एक बच्चा एक डिफरेंट टाइप ऑफ हाउस अडॉप्ट करता है और उसका मॉडल बनाता है और फिर उसका प्रेजेंटेशन करता है। ये तो हुई बात छोटे क्लास की। आगे के क्लास में क्या होता है? जब बच्चे बड़े हो रहे हैं तो हर तरह के लर्निंग में उनको हम एक्सपीरियंस देने की कोशिश करते हैं। सबसे लेफ्ट में अगर आप देखेंगे वो हिस्ट्री पढ़ रहे हैं, रेनेसांस पीरियड पढ़ रहे हैं, और रेनेसांस के जो प्राइम पर्सनालिटीज थे उनके कहानियां सुनते हुए वो उनके पोर्ट्रेट्स को बनाते हैं। उस वक्त वो उनके अटायर, उनके कॉस्ट्यूम्स, उस पीरियड के कैसी लाइफस्टाइल थी, वो सारा कुछ वो एक्सपीरियंस करने लगते हैं। वो जब आगे चलते हुए अगेन हिस्ट्री में जब हिस्ट्री में आगे पढ़ते हैं कि दुनिया जब बड़ी होती गई, डिस्कवरीज नए आते गए, लोग कैसे एक देश से दूसरे देश जाने लगे, इंटरनेशनल वर्ल्ड का एक एक्सपीरियंस शुरू होने लगा, तब वो चाणक्य बोल के जो हमारा मरीन लैब है, आई कैन कॉल इट अ सेंटर, लर्निंग सेंटर है, जहाँ पे मरीन एंड नेवी बेस क्या ट्रेनिंग होता है, हम वहां विजिट करने गए थे और बच्चों ने वहां जाके सारा कुछ सीखा। जब उनका सही वक्त आया 8th स्टैंडर्ड में, उन्होंने इंडस्ट्रियल रेवोल्यूशन पढ़ा और उस वक्त उन्होंने एक कंप्यूटर को पहली बार स्कूल में ऑफिशियली लाया गया और बच्चों ने उसको खोल कर उसके बारे में सीखा। बजाय इसके कि बचपन से वो कंप्यूटर को एक बहुत बड़ा इम्पोर्टेंट और हमसे ज्यादा स्मार्ट डिवाइस समझे, हमने पहले उनको डिसमेंटल करके दिखा दिया कि अंदर कुछ भी नहीं है, सारा कुछ हम ही ने बनाया है, हम कंप्यूटर से भी ज्यादा इम्पोर्टेंट है, हमें सोचना है कि इस चीज को हमें कैसे यूज करना है।
Thank you so much. I mean, it's amazing to see all the pictures and how it all function in Shishyaa school. Thank you so much. We move to our next speaker, Miss Zainab Bhinderwala. Miss Zainab Bhinderwala holds a master's in human development. She began her career as a supervisor and admin head at Childcare Center at Tata Institute of Fundamental Research before joining Muktangan in 2008, an innovative education model promoting inclusive, community-driven learning. Over 17 years, she has played diverse roles, from training community members as teachers and developing teacher education content to leading Muktangan's Teacher Education Center. Currently, as a leader for early childhood development, she ensures quality in 7 Muktangan preschools operating in Mumbai public schools and drives outreach and advocacy initiatives in ECD. Her most transformative work has been strengthening Anganwadis, first by building the capacity of local educators across 271 rural Maharashtra Anganwadis, and now scaling this impact to 530 Anganwadis in Nanded. Additionally, she has been a consultant for various NGOs, training early grade teachers in education through creative expressions and empowering community youth. A passionate advocate for arts and education, she is also a certified Zentangle teacher and a qualified art-based therapy practitioner, integrating creative expression into learning environments. Over to you, Rahil.
Thank you, Kiran. We've got, learned so much from Ms. Basu about the way in which we would look at an alternate school, and when we're thinking of learning spaces within a mainstream school like Muktangan, for instance, one of the questions that comes to mind is what is the importance of designing flexible learner-centered physical classrooms? And that would be something that I would like to address, ask Zainab to address.
Thank you. Thank you for the question, Rai, and thank you to everyone who's present here. Am I audible loud and clear? Okay. So thank you, Ms. Basu. I think you set the stage very right for me. आपने जो cover किया है, pedagogy क्या है, school क्या है, उसी को आगे बढ़ाते हुए I will go ahead. So today my presentation will focus more on flexible learner centered physical classrooms. इसको कैसे डिजाइन किया जाता है, क्यों किया जाता है और कैसे किया जाता है. So next slide please. So I'd like to start my presentation, a short presentation by this poem written by Rudyard Kipling. I keep 6 honest serving men. I keep 6 honest serving men. They taught me all I knew. Their names are what and why and when, and how and where and who. I send them over the land and sea. I send them east and west. But after they worked for me, I give them all a rest. I let them rest from 9 to 5, for I'm busy then. As well for breakfast, lunch, and tea, for they are hungry men. But different folks have different views. I know a person small. She keeps 10 million serving men who get no rest at all. She sends them abroad on their own affairs from the second she opens eyes. 1 million house, 2 million wares, and a 7 million wives. So what do you think? What do you all think? What is this poem about? ये रुडयार्ड किपलिंग वेरी फेमस राइटर ने लिखी हुई है. किसको ये डिस्क्राइब कर रहा है? Who is this small little man जिसको बिल्कुल रेस्ट मिलता ही नहीं है? I would like to hear your responses please in the chat. The minute that person opens her eyes or his eyes, till that person retires for the day, प्रश्न ही प्रश्न. कैसा हुआ? क्यों हुआ? कहाँ हुआ? किसके साथ हुआ? Absolutely. So I think I've read 2-3 chats is describing the child. So by nature, children are very curious and they have an innate capacity to explore and create their own learning from the environment. And in Muktangan, हम यही principle को embrace करते हैं और हम वैसे ही हमारे learning environment को create करते हैं. So going back to my own childhood, when I was a kid, मुझे अब तक याद है मेरा first classroom when I entered my kindergarten. ये classroom बहुत colorful था. There was artwork. It was a very comfortable classroom. There was a reading corner in the at the end of a classroom. Class के corner में एक reading corner था. और जो teacher थी इन्होंने सीखना और सिखाना बहुत exciting feel करवाया. So that space gave me a lot of comfort. It welcomed me and inspired me to be in that classroom. So imagine if every child को ये वाला experience मिले जो मुझे अभी इतने सालों के बाद भी याद है. So imagine if every child had that experience, how learning would be for that child. Can you go to the next slide, please, Shruti? So Bandana ji started a presentation asking, school क्या है? So मैं थोड़ा उसको आगे बढ़ाते हुए पूछना चाहूँगी, what is the purpose of schooling? Why do you think, why do children come to school or why do schools exist? Oh, Shruti's already given out the response, but never mind. I was wanting the audience to reply to this. Okay, जैसे हमने कहा कि children are all curious natural learners. To support each child's search for meaning, as they're natural and innately they're very curious. Okay, so इसके लिए हम schooling होती है, schools चल रही है और school में बच्चे आते हैं. अगर this is the reason why schools are, to address every child's need for search of their meaning and to help them to create their own learning experience. So what kind of pedagogy should be there? Okay, so Shruti, you can click the next thing. So it all depends on the kind of pedagogy or the method of teaching that we are going to use. And I think Basuji very well covered pedagogy in alternative model schools. Now, if you have a pedagogy, the method that you want to teach your children, for very, very important is उसको support करने के लिए what you need is, next point, is a learning environment. Okay, so without a learning environment, आपका pedagogy है, आपका methodology वो भी काम नहीं करेगा. So very, very important is pedagogy and learning environment both are very much intertwined. The syllabus, the curriculum, child development, the learning environment all have to be going hand in hand. Next slide. Okay, so Muktangan की आपने पहले भी फिल्म देखी and you saw our classrooms and today my focus is going to be more on the physical space कि physical space को कैसे create किया जाए जहाँ पे children become independent, they have more autonomy, they can select their own learning based on their interests and their needs. So imagine अगर classroom अगर ऐसा जगह है जहाँ पे learning सिर्फ होती नहीं है but classroom is such a place which shapes how the learning unfolds. Okay, so if we shift our mindset a little bit, because usually classrooms are designed in a way चाहे learning कैसे करवाना है हम वैसे design करते हैं, but अगर हम ऐसा space create करें जहाँ पे ऑटोमेटिकली सक्रिय रूप से सीखना और सिखाना होता है. So I think every child would have achieved what their inner desire is. Okay, so in Muktangan, हमारी जो philosophy, another very important point Basuji said, the pedagogy is based on the philosophy. So Muktangan's philosophy is that our children are innate learners. They all are curious learners, and based on that, the classrooms are designed. So हमारी classrooms जो है सिर्फ केवल चार दीवारें नहीं है. They are quite active in nature. They are not static. They constantly keep changing based on the children's learning journey. They are very thoughtfully planned, they are flexible, and there are learner center spaces available for children so that हम बच्चों का all round development support करें और उसके हिसाब से we are creating our classrooms. Next slide. Okay, so Muktangan's pedagogy of teaching is the social constructive method. We all are educators here. I think everybody knows what social constructivism is. But if not, मैं थोड़े सारांश में बताती हूँ. So, where children are actively engaged, बच्चे अपनी खुद की learning create करते हैं. They construct their own knowledge brick by brick, and in a social context. The teacher here is not a dictator. Teacher is not the person who's just dictating or teaching, but teacher here is a facilitator. And along with the teacher, very important role is the peers. जो भी peer हमारे classroom में है, जो बच्चों के friends है, who are a little more knowledgeable other than the child, they help and support the child to create his or her learning. और ये learning जो है हमारी in Muktangan is purely based on children. The assessment is based on student observation, and based on that हमारा learning experience is being designed. It's not, of course, we do follow the state board curriculum. We are following the state board syllabus. So हमारे मुक्तांगन के alternative, in fact, whatever Basuji was saying about alternative model, I was trying to think कि हमारे कितने ticks हो रहे हैं and how many ticks do we get on the checklist. So it was wonderful that yes, I think we do get all the ticks on that. So we are not over here only delivering the syllabus, but also we are shaping every child's learning. Because we believe that all children are coming from diverse experiences. उनके past experience, past learning knowledge जो है, past experience, वहीं से हम आगे build up करते हैं. We also encourage teacher-student relationship. Our relationship is very strong. Our teacher-student ratio in a classroom is 1:15. A small group helps the teacher to bond with the child. A teacher understands the child's needs, interests. Also, our teachers are from the same community as the children. So, काफी सारे दूसरी चीजें are taking care of, the language, the cultural affinity, the aspirations that the parent and the community has. Also, in a social constructive pedagogy, it also encourages the emergent literacy, numeracy, and self-directed learning. Along with all the academic part of it, we also encourage, obviously, social emotional learning, well-being, as Basuji also said, right now is at the need of the hour. The mental well-being of children is quite spoken about right now because there's a need. And also all our learning experiences are designed developmentally appropriate as per the child's need. The teacher here in Muktangan has the autonomy to design her own curriculum. And we also involve the community because we think it's a shared responsibility that educating a child is not the responsibility of a school or the teacher alone. It is a shared responsibility. Can we go next? Okay. So what is this learning environment that we've been talking about? Okay. So हमेशा माना जाता है कि the child's first educator or the teacher are the parents. The second educator is the teacher. The learning environment is the third educator. Okay. So even the NEP 2020 recognizes that the learning environment बहुत ही crucial है. It's a very important factor in how the child develops cognitively, emotionally, as well as socially. And it also emphasizes that holistic experiential and play-based learning हमें देना चाहिए बच्चों को early years में, so that when they grow up, as they go along their educational ladder, the foundation is very, very important. And that is why our classroom need to be designed in such a way कि जहाँ engaging हो, ज़्यादा बच्चे involve हो, inclusive हो, every child is included, no child is left behind. And we also design the classroom in such a way that it's addressing the needs of the diverse learning needs that each child may have. Okay, we all know that every child has an individual learning need. There are individual differences among children. NEP 2020 also advocates for a safe, stimulating, joyful learning space. और ये सारे principles Muktangan demonstrate कर चुकी है पिछले 20 सालों से. So the whole point today talking about Muktangan model is not that ये कुछ idea है जो होनी चाहिए या करना चाहिए. ये Muktangan ने पिछले 22 सालों में mainstream education में, mainstream स्कूलों में serving the marginalized community के साथ हमने प्रूव किया है. So I strongly believe that if Muktangan कर सकता है, then definitely I think anyone can also do that. Can you go to the next slide? Okay, so quickly I will take you through what are the four key elements. Yeah, when you are designing uh, the learning environment, what are the points you need to keep in mind? First thing, the intention has to be there. Okay, your intention, the learning environment has to be designed in such a way that it is purposefully supporting your learning outcome. आपके जो learning goals है, उसको ध्यान में रखते हुए you are going to design the setup. Okay, so here in the photograph, you see that the teacher is playing the role play of a chef and she's describing some vegetables. So the sitting arrangement around the teacher is very different. Okay, all our furniture is very light, stackable, movable, with children themselves keep moving as per the need of the activity or the lesson. Okay, the next point is flexibility. The 1 minute, go back, please. Yeah. So the layouts in the classrooms are also such which can keep changing. Certain times is a group activity where it's a big group, it's a full class of three group of children working together. Certain times they go in their individual groups. Certain times it's a pair work, it's individual work where they need more focus time, maybe during a math problem solving time. So it's flexible, furnitures move around, you can see, and they're working on the floor. So flexibility is very important as one of the key indicator for effective learning environment. Next slide.
Zainab,
So
we have to wrap up in 2 minutes.
Yeah, I'll start wrapping up. Okay. The next important thing is visibility. We are talking about a learning environment where materials are available, but those materials have to be accessible and visible to the children. If these materials which are bought for the children are manipulatives, papers, to make models, clay, whatever we are using for whatever subject, suppose science experiments, if they all kept in lock and key, it's not going to promote excuse me, any kind of learning, or children are not going to be able to construct their own knowledge. So they have to be available, accessible, and inviting for the children. And fourth, and the most important thing I think most of us forget, just excuse me 1 second, is the documentation. Okay, all of this is available or planned by the teacher, but at the end of it, when the children have created something, have come up with their work, that needs to be displayed, that needs to be documented well, so children are able to celebrate their own learning, they're able to see their own work and see their own learning journeys. Next slide. So having said all of this, क्यों important है? Why is the learning environment important? Okay, so at Muktangan, we believe the culture is very much important part of the learning environment. The learning environment should be such which is democratic, where every child has a say. There's mutual learning happening, is a give and take, where teacher is a facilitator, learning from the children, and children are learning back from the teacher. The human resources, the teachers are not alone in this entire learning journey. There is teaching and learning happening with the peer group. Parent and the community at large is also involved. Learning resources are accessible, the classroom layout, like I said, and even in the photographs you'll have seen that the classroom's layout keep changing as per the need of the lesson plan. And the fourth and the most crucial part is respecting the cognitive aspect, that is a child's own brain. In Muktangan, we believe the biggest tool, learning tool, the most powerful learning tool is a child's own brain. So if our classrooms are designed in such a way which is supporting the child's limbic system, is supporting the brain development, and if the child is a happy child, the learning happens accordingly. Last slide, please. Okay, so the three aspects of a learning centered flexible classroom. The physical layout, I think I've spoken about it a little in the presentation earlier. So physical layout, the design has to be child friendly, flexible spaces. Okay, like I'll give you an example. There are in our preschool classroom in our younger grades, there are no furniture, there are no stools or chairs, but children sit on the floor and there are circle painted. Okay, as they move up in the primary classrooms, there are smaller groups with shorter stools where children can still interact and look at each other, and it's a small knit group. And as the children grow, the furniture then moves from the shorter stool, they become taller stools or chairs. And again, the flexibility is continuously there of moving around in the classroom and rearranging the tables and chairs. Also in the younger classrooms, we have learning zones, which are different areas specific to science, music, where children do pretend play. There's art and music area, there is maths, there is writing area, there is a discovery of the world, or the EVS area also. As the children move up in the higher grades, these classes then become subject specific. So what happens during this time, the children select their own, based on their interest, they go to that particular area or that subject classroom and select a learning experience to suit their own need and interest. So I've been getting warning to please wrap up. Okay, go to the last slide, please. Okay, so I like to just end here that the three major impact that if you designed your spaces in a very mindful and a thoughtful way, these are going to be a three outcomes, three results. One thing, your student engagement, whether it's cognitive, behavioral, or emotional, is going to be very, very high. Social emotional growth बच्चों का होगा because there's peer learning, there's collaboration, there is problem solving. Because children work and sit together, there's more empathy. And the last important part is there's whatever they learn is going to be for lifelong, and they learn a lot of adaptability. They learn life skills because the environment of the classroom is allowing flexibility. There's more resilient in our children.
Thank you so much, Zainab. We've just got a very sort of minute flavor of the classrooms in Muktangan through your presentations. There's always so much more to hear about, especially thinking of physical layout, sensory rich environment, as well as the learning zones, which is the way in which we can make physical classrooms flexible learner centered spaces. So now as we move on with the presentations, I would like to request Kiran to introduce our next speaker, and then we'll continue.
Thank you, Rahi. Our next speaker is Rashmi Jejurikar. Rashmi is a trained biologist and she's done research in neuroscience at NCBS Bangalore. She then got interested in school education and the neuroscience of how we learn. Rashmi worked as curriculum and program developer at Agastya International Foundation, an NGO working in the space of hands-on science education for underprivileged children in rural India. Rashmi believes that her association with Think was a transformative experience for her as it helped her overcome fear and insecurity associated with open exploration and begin to see learning as an exciting journey. She's also taught middle and high school science at Farm Hill Learning, Krishnagiri, where she has tried to incorporate inquiry and critical thinking into teaching practice. Over to you, Rahi.
Thank you, Kiran. Rashmi has been a facilitator engaging with inquiry-oriented education for various groups, both in terms of background and age. So I would like to ask a question of Rashmi. If she could highlight some experiential and inquiry-oriented learning approaches in your presentation.
Yeah. Hi, thank you all for having me. I think of all the speakers, I probably have the least amount of experience in the education space. Nevertheless, I'd like to share some of the insights that I have gained and my own learnings with using inquiry-oriented education. So my work in education began with pedagogy, but with Agastya Foundation, where I did exhibit design and enriched the pedagogy that was already there to ensure that no misconceptions are being created through oversimplification of a model or of a certain activity to represent a certain biological process. But then I got associated with Think, which is a collective interested in inquiry and critical thinking across age groups. And, I want to pick up on what Zainab said earlier about the brain being actually the most important tool, pedagogical tool that we have access to. And, the human brain offers tremendous opportunity in terms of what it can do. And also a lot of challenges because of all the hang-ups and everything it gets stuck with and, pushes itself into a corner when it comes to open-ended learning. So, I have actually worked with, like Rahi said, several different contexts to be able to, use this kind of an approach. And I'd like to share my experiences. So if you could just go to the next slide, not this one, the next one. Yeah. So we've, heard about different kinds of goals that an educational program can have. And it's important for us to separate, first of all, what the aim of the program is and how we achieve that aim. So for a lot of times, when our pedagogy, especially when it's very exciting, we tend to conflate the two. We make the pedagogy the aim of our program, but that's not the case. The pedagogy is just a means to achieve a certain goal. And in this case, like Miss Bandana also mentioned about constructing knowledge, right? Even with inquiry-based learning, one of the things that happens is we want children to arrive at a certain knowledge that is presented in their textbooks, or something that we regard to be knowledge, and we help them arrive at that in a gentle, confidence-inducing way, right? And while this gives them the experience of like a first-hand experience of coming up with knowledge and creating their own knowledge, it is also constrained in terms of the destination being already decided for the child. We know what we want them to learn, right? And there is some sort of flexibility in how they arrive at it, but even there is some sort of a constraint imposed, because there are only so many ways you can get there. But one of the things, the approaches that Think taught me was about, if we change that goal and say that the goal is to learn how to think, and what you end up producing as a result is unimportant. I mean, it need not be something in the textbook. It could be something totally different that they have created, which doesn't match what is currently regarded as knowledge. But if that process has helped them understand how knowledge is constructed in the academic world, then that is our goal. So our programs are based on coming up with goals which are building blocks of thinking, such as how do we reason, how do we define things, how do we evaluate something critically, how do we develop a theory in various disciplines. And that takes the center stage of our learning practice, teaching practice, rather than the end product becoming the goal. And we are born with all of this. Like when we are young children, we are constantly trying to make sense of the world around us. But this thing never is given sort of the center stage. That is never the goal of a program. When we become better at it, it's usually the byproduct of something else. And, we imbibe it in some casual way. But what we are trying to do is make that the focus of our teaching practice. Could you go to the next slide? So I'd like to just share a small session that we did, where we did this with children as well as college students, where we were trying to get them to build a theory of light and color. And we begin with, some assumptions about the way light works. And we can change these assumptions. And we offer them different phenomena that we want to explore. So why is the shape of a shadow always a certain way? Why does the shadow appear dark? Or if you apply nail paint, then why does it appear darker when you apply more coats? And after a point, it doesn't matter. So we begin with phenomena that are part of our daily experience. And the children, or the learners in general, develop a theory that would explain this. And it doesn't matter what the theory is, but equally important is that we give them the ability to evaluate that theory. So it's not like, anything they create goes just because they have created it. They should be able to learn how they would critically evaluate that particular knowledge that they have created, and how they would, go forward with that particular knowledge, right? And this also helps them to critically evaluate any knowledge. So when they read a textbook, when they read the news, when they read a WhatsApp forward on a family group, they are able to evaluate the claim being made in that and make their own decision about whether or not they should believe it. So we empower children to think critically about everything that they see and read around them. Could you go to the next slide? So now that we know that the goal is for a child to make sense of their own experience and to be able to create their knowledge, you can use any kind of pedagogy, keeping in mind that your focus is on the goal and not the method that you use, right? And what is important is that the pedagogy has a certain value system, and that is what I want to mainly focus on in my presentation, which the value system that would allow you to create that kind of learning, that kind of experience. And like we said before, the brain has all kinds of hang-ups, and we don't want children to in general become insecure or be afraid of not knowing something, or hide the fact that they don't know something, not raise their hands, right? And all of these become patterns as we grow older. So it's much easier earlier, but as we grow older, we completely like start eliminating experiences where our insecurity or ignorance is revealed. So that is something we want to completely remove from their minds and make it a joyful experience where, uncertainty and not knowing is a beautiful thing, because then you get to know it. And that is what, I have tried practicing in these various contexts. And what I've come up, I mean, for myself is a sort of value system, or you can think of it as a checklist of, things that you can do as a facilitator to allow these experiences to, shape them in the right direction. And this is also kind of learning environment, but it's not physical. It's a sort of emotional learning environment provided by the facilitator. And, if possible, the school, the family, if everybody is of this kind around the child, we end up creating a world where children are not afraid, and children themselves become that way when they grow older. So so I have a few points that I thought I would share. Some of them may seem very simplistic, but what is important to note is that unless this is done relentlessly and without compromise in every single teaching effort that you do, they appear simplistic. But what makes it challenging to actually do that every single time? And that's what I'm trying to adopt for myself, and it might help some of you. Could you go to the next slide? So a lot of children say that, I've heard this from children, that everybody says we should ask questions. But when we actually ask questions, no one wants to hear it, especially if it's something you don't know the answer to. So there are different levels of questioning. One of the questions is, like where you ask a question, like a what question, like an information question, and the teacher either knows the answer or doesn't know the answer. And if the teacher doesn't know the answer, that, child is banned, like in general, in a mainstream school, right? So, but there is another level of questioning where if I make a claim in a classroom that, oh, this is good for you, and the child questions that, I can't be, authoritative and say that, no, it is good for you because I'm telling you so. So we need to genuinely be okay. And it's very hard to be okay because, if a sixth grader asks you something and you don't know the answer to that, you do feel kind of weird, but we want to remove that, feeling, and we want to be genuinely okay with our ideas being questioned. Second is, sometimes, children give you one word answers to some question. They'll throw in some keyword or, some buzzword, and you don't even know if they have understood what they understand the word they're using. So make sure that you value in front of them, value that the thoughts are being articulated carefully, that, if a child struggles with that articulation, don't interrupt them. Let them come up with the whole sentence and then help them make that sentence better. And this is something, a game of patience, but it's something that is very, very, important that the child develops for future life as well. And similarly, demonstrate that you do not value information. So if they tell you what is a black hole or what is a gravitational wave, which often comes up in our sessions because, we begin something basic and they bring in these, things that they are reading about in the news or in popular culture and loosely throwing these words around. Make sure you tell them that that's not what you value. You value their thinking and you value how they are coming up with certain, understanding, and not what the information that they have come up with. The fourth is, do not be afraid to appear ignorant. So if you don't know the answer to something, accept it, and you can then help, ask them for resources to help you figure it out. Recognize and correct your errors in their presence. So it's very important that if you make an error, if you've said something that you want to take back, don't, stuff it under the carpet. Like, do it in their presence so that they know that you are a learner. Could you go to the next slide? Help them and yourself to separate people from ideas. Don't accept something just because somebody is saying it or some source is saying it. Similarly, don't reject things that, just because somebody is saying it, you want to reject it because you don't respect that person. So create that sort of an environment where they are constantly separating people from ideas. Encourage working both individually and together because both are important. And when we, do a lot of group work, sometimes individuals don't learn. They learn as a group, and then, there is problems of that kind. So make sure that you spend time on both. I think this was touched upon earlier about helping them make their learning explicit. What have they learned? What have they not understood? Help them every time to see that. then deliberately leave some things unsaid. Don't try to give all the information that you have. Be okay if they've not understood something fully, because it is a long-term process. It's not something that is just going to happen in one session, right? Like most of the knowledge that we have today was constructed over centuries, so it would be weird to expect them to have that knowledge in one session. Make a plan for continued learning beyond class. So make a specific plan for homework, and see that the homework features in your, the goals feature in your homework. It's not just because you want them to do something at home, but it should be part of your overall learning plan. Can you go to the final slide? And liberate yourself from choosing a fixed path for a session. So don't decide that this is where I want them to be at this time. This is the knowledge that I want them to build. Just, be free. And this is actually the most challenging part, because, sometimes we want to have something to cling on to. But if you really want to build on their ideas, you have to liberate yourself of that. The 12th one, most obvious, but, be patient and kind. It seems obvious, but it's not, because it's very, very challenging to listen to people struggling to articulate a sentence, especially if you work with underprivileged groups. It's hard to help them do that, but it is also important. If you complete their sentences, they are never going to learn that. And then again, understanding emotions, like I said before. Why are they insecure? Why are they not raising their hands? Or are they afraid of not knowing something, or how they are coming across or being perceived? Show them that you are a learner first and a facilitator second. The more you embody that you are a learner, the more they will value learning, as opposed to already having learned something. And finally, reflect on your practice every day. So what did it go? Did it actually fulfill the goal you had in mind, or did you just enjoy it and they enjoyed it? But think about whether it is actually aligned with the goals that you have in mind. So yeah, I just wanted to share these insights, and I hope that it was of use to some of you who are beginning your teaching practice, or even someone who's been teaching for a while. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rashmi. I think this is inquiry-oriented education is definitely the need of the day, especially given the fact that we need to create an emotional learning environment apart from the physical and the social. And I think the idea of, what you said very beautifully, that uncertainty and not knowing is beautiful itself. I think that sort of, carries over from our conversations with all the speakers regarding how learners create knowledge and how they critically evaluate it. So I think that's something that one should always keep in mind in terms of the idea that one needs to hold knowledge tentatively as well, not just have everything as a boxed in and ready to sort of be offered to someone else. We'll have Kiran introduce our next speaker. And then carry forward these conversations in the Q&A session as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Rahi. Our fourth speaker for today is Ms. Shikha Dutt. Ms. Shikha Dutt is a passionate and creative educator with over 20 years of experience of engaging with formal and informal learning spaces. She has a deep commitment towards enabling learning spaces and programs that encourage experiential and self-directed learning and foster a sense of inquiry and reflection on the nature of the self and the awareness of the world we live in. Ms. Shikha has taught in schools like Krishnamurti Foundation Schools, Marudam Farm School, and Step by Step School. She has actively developed learning spaces, including libraries and maker spaces, and facilitated place-based and project-based learning. Ms. Shikha is particularly interested in community-led initiatives at the intersection of ecology and culture, focusing on crafts, livelihoods, sustainability, and education. Before her work in education, she collaborated with textile artisan communities across India and was visiting faculty member at NIFT and NID. Welcome, Ms. Shikha. Oh, sorry, Rahi, please continue.
Thank you, Kiran. With diverse profiles and interests, Shikha has navigated through the creation of learning spaces in both mainstream and alternate settings. I would like to request Shikha to address the question, what is the role of teacher-student interaction and peer learning in fostering creative thinking?
Thanks, Rahi. I just want to say a lot of what I wanted to talk about has already been talked about, and it's wonderful because it sort of lays the context for what I have to share. What I'm going to talk about is actually two kinds of spaces that I worked with. And I think I can't say whether creativity is the only term to capture what it evoked, but it built up a whole kind of environment and possibilities for such kind of thinking to evolve. The next slide, please. So as many speakers before have already sort of pointed out, learning unfolds in various contexts, inside classrooms, outside classrooms, a whole range of spaces. And all of these have various elements that we experience and we interact with. And these come together to shape how we learn. I loved what Rashmi had to say about also uncertainty being a factor in all of this, and bringing that in as an active learning tool. Are we willing to work with something like that? It's not talked about often, but I think it's very critical. Next. So as we know that most learning environments work on building three basic capacities. It helps build knowledge, which is facts, concepts, information, which is largely what a lot of mainstream schools stress upon. It helps build skills, which is abilities or competencies on how to do things. And the last and perhaps the most important thing it actually focuses on is building dispositions, because dispositions are the attitudes and tendencies, value systems that children carry with them through life. And I think this is the one which is least stressed upon, unfortunately, in our education system, but is perhaps the most important thing. Next. So some of the questions that we're going to look at is, how can a learning space shape our approach to learning? I think Zainab talked about it at great length. What is its impact on learning experiences? What's its impact on learner engagement? And what is its impact on the relationship between the educator and the learner? I'm going to look at some of these questions through two projects that I've worked on, or two spaces I've worked on. Next, please. So the first is, I started my career by sort of working as a classroom teacher. I went to schools because I had a lot of questions about schooling and education when my own children went to school. And so I started with classroom teaching. When I worked with classrooms, I had a lot of questions about classrooms and how they operated and all of that. And I felt there was a need for very different kind of spaces within schools. Schools are largely classroom centric, and I felt there was a dire need to break out of the stranglehold of those classrooms, because classrooms are not always the way Zainab has talked about them. They're not always sort of flexible learning spaces. They come with their own limitations. They come with their own baggage. Now I realized that there are spaces in schools which have possibilities to be far more sort of open learning spaces. And two such spaces that I could identify that are used by students across the school are actually libraries, and a second space, which is what I call a maker space or a tinker shed. And both of these offer possibilities for a very, very rich kind of learning to happen. So let me start with the first. Now, this is a library in the school where I'm currently working. When I started with it, it looked like this when I first joined. And I could see, books locked into cupboards, desks placed in a certain way. And as you can see, that sort of created a certain, for a child who would come in, a certain preconception of what the space was meant for. It was meant for serious study, and very few children bothered opening the cupboards to reach those resources. And the next slide, please, Rai. This is how we rework the space. So we realized that the same space could actually, this is exactly the same space, create zones for learning, different kinds of activities to happen, open up the bookshelves, keep open shelving, and just make it a happier space which children actually want to spend time in. I think one of the things was that when children like spending time in a space and they have access to resources, they tend to actually want to explore and learn. That's a natural tendency of a child. Most spaces actually discourage them from doing that. Next slide, please. So this is what the library looks like now when it's being used. And the library is used for many different things. People come in to use it for study. They come to use it for actually making things together. It's not just a space, it's not just a repository of books. It also has people coming in to talk, meetups, all of that. They come in to browse, not always to explore things, not just always work towards something. And I think that kind of a space has a great value in the whole learning process. Also, one thing I want to point out here is that we also look carefully, the reason why it's called a learning commons is because it's a common space where people get together. It's a community space. It's also a space that enables the learner to shape their own learning. So we have both digital and print resource, a variety of resources which allow the learner to actually access in sort of information on their own. Next, please. The second space that I'm going to talk about is a space that is a step up from what most schools have, what is called a traditional laboratory space, right? You have a science lab, a physics lab, bio lab, etc. What we wanted to create was a very different kind of space. And can we go to the next slide? So this is a space called a Tinker Shed. And this is a space that I worked with, I helped create in Sahyadri when I was there. Now, this is a space which is also a resource-rich space, except it has a very different set of resources from the library. It has tools, it has materials, it has one computer, but it has a lot of sort of space to actually work with your hands in. And this space is very different from a science lab. One of the discussions I remember having when we talked in Sahyadri, one of the arguments that constantly came up was, but we have a science lab, we have art studios, why do we need a Tinker space? And we spent a lot of time actually looking at the value such as, creating such a space brings into the learning environment of a school. This particular space is, again, like a library, not limited by curriculums, not limited by the agenda of the classroom, and is a space where you work with your hands and through observation, you inquire and you look for solutions. Next slide, please. So this is what a Tinker space looks like when it's actually being used. As you can see, children are actively working with things, making things, exploring materials, working together. It has a very different feel from the photograph we saw of the laboratory. The next slide, please. So what do these spaces have in common? And I think that's what I really want to focus on. First of all, both of these are open learning spaces where learning is led by the needs of the learner as they are perceived by the learner. It's the perception is not that of a teacher. The teacher doesn't decide what the learner needs to learn, but the learner decides for themselves. And the space allows for a certain agency and autonomy to the learners. I'm sorry, the second bit has got cut off, but it was actually about how these are beyond the realm of subject areas and their limitations. So they allow the learner to sort of navigate through many different areas of learning seamlessly. And that's the beauty of this kind of a space. They're not constantly sort of cut up into little bits and pieces. The third is they offer equitable access to resources. What happens very often we see is that children do not have, when a child is in a particular classroom, they're limited again by the resources meant for that particular age, books that are limited to that particular age, resources that are limited to that particular age. But both libraries and Tinker Sheds are resource-rich environments, and they give them open and equitable access to most of those resources. So children are able to determine their own learning pathways and pace of learning, unlike classroom spaces. The fourth is that both of these have constructivist approaches to learning. The child constructs their own learning based on as they're going about exploring what they want to learn, they're constantly constructing their own learning. In the case of a Tinker Shed, let me just give you a quick example. So for instance, we have something called design challenges that we run through a Tinker Shed, and the aim of a design challenge can be as simple as sending a marble through a pathway from one end to another end. And the limitations or constraints are sort of defined, saying that you have to construct a loop, you have to construct a ramp, you have to construct a zigzag pathway. Now these are, and then the child is put through, is taught some basic skills on how to construct the contraptions. Once they've done that, it's up to them how they work. And they work in groups, work with direct observation, and that observation is giving them a feedback. That observation is what is constantly informing their learning. So they're not starting from an end point. I mean, though there is a goal, there isn't the learning, there is no end point to the learning, but rather the learning is constantly getting constructed as they move, as they work. So this kind of differentiated learning pathway also allows it to be very, very individualized. There's what we call low threshold, high ceiling possibilities. It allows a child, there's no prerequisite required to enter the space. Anybody can enter the space and begin. You don't need to have worked from level 1 to level 5 and to be able to access level 6. And it allows people to go to the highest, the children to work to the highest possibilities that they can. These spaces are all fundamentally inclusive, non-competitive spaces, because there is no one right answer. There is no one solution to a problem. There is no one set of absolutes. There's no room for comparison, and therefore non-competitiveness. Both have a certain playful attitude towards learning with tolerance for failure. They build a sense of community and collaboration. And I think the ninth point is what I would also like to emphasize. They promote the democratic principle of freedom with responsibility. Now, we talk a lot about self-directed learning. And we want our children to be self-directed learners. We give them access to a lot of information, resources, but increasingly it's also a challenge for children to learn to self-regulate. And this kind of an approach gets children to do both, to take ownership for their learnings, but also learn to regulate how they use the resources that they have. Lastly, the role of the educator is not an authority in this space at all. In fact, it really helps if the educator is very often doesn't know, beyond very basic skills, is not even well versed in that subject, because I've seen that then the child and the educator truly learn together. They're co-learners in the journey of the child, and they're guides from the side. They don't talk from the front. They do not demonstrate. They do not, beyond the fundamental skills that I talked about. They don't go beyond that. They know nothing more than what the child does. So I think this is pretty much it. I'm sorry I was racing through it a bit, but.
Thank you so much, Shikha. I think what was really significant about the presentation was the idea of the natural tendency of the learner to explore and learn, want to explore and learn, and that to be able to give that space to children, I think becomes something which is, in fact, not just a moral responsibility of the educator and the system, but also finally something that will shape the future and create, further such spaces for the next generation of students. So it was, I think, a wonderful experience to have all the 4 speakers share various views and insights from their own experiences. And there are some questions already which are coming from the speakers, both here on Zoom and those who are watching the live stream on YouTube. I think since we have not too much time left, I would like to have Ms. Basu address one of the questions which has come to her, and that was regarding the core aspects that support learning. What would your view be on what the core aspects that support learning are?
So what I would like to mention here is, we're all working towards this one intention that children should have a holistic experience of learning. There should be independent learning. I really like the angle of self-regulation also that was brought out. But I think we really need to realize that a child is dependent on two platforms. One is the school, but the other is the home front. And the shouldering of education has to be done at both ends. So while we are creating a very unique space and platform, what really also is essential is that we are able to enroll the parent community into the idea of how to nurture the learning, the space from where learning gets created. And here I'm talking about someone mentioned about the NEP. NEP also speaks about the Panchakoshas, right? And there is where we need to get aligned with. When we talk of children who come to learn, they have physical needs. Before they can even step into the school, the prerequisites are: have they slept well? Are they eating nutritious food? Because look at the environment in which children are growing today. They are all around surrounded by 24/7 media. They are eating a lot of junk food. And if we want that children are present to the efforts that are being put in by the school, the inner presence requires that they are supported from the inner world. So that is one thing. Enough play. Another thing that we want to see is that our children do not have excessive screen time. And they are also not having gaming addictions. I may be talking off the panel conversations here, but I'm actually saying things which make a huge difference to the environment of learning that teachers are creating. So even if it's a class of maybe 30, for all we know, maybe 15 of them are not sleeping on time. And that becomes a hurdle for a teacher to deliver the lessons. From the second angle is how organized is their after school time. One of the teachers mentioned about the homework, and the goals have to be carried forward in the homework. But are the home spaces allowing for that to develop? Because nowadays we see that even assignments and everything, they are being eaten up by other practices. How are we making sure that the learning has a space of incubation in the child and also is evolving within the child? Then we also need to consider something very beautifully spoken here, the relationship between the teacher and the student. There has to be a sense of trust, love, and comfort with the teacher so that we are able to allow our children free expression and self-confidence. Because unless there is free expression and acknowledgement coming from a teacher, in the lower years, it does not shape into confidence of a child. Nothing is automatic. Everything needs a very, very symbiotic association there. And of course, what we want to tell, which everyone has said, the opportunities we give our children. So in my world, there is a 4-pronged process. PORE, prerequisites, being organized, relationships, and experiences. I think this holds the entire learning space for the child from the individuality point of view.
Thank you so much, Ms. Basu. I think there's never enough time to do justice to everything that we want to learn from speakers like you with so much experience and diverse sort of range of suggestions and advice that you can also have for the speakers. One of the questions, in fact, was directed to the presentation that Shikha has made in terms of just the fact that there might be quite a few constraints. Let's say if it could be limited staffing or it could be a government school space. And the question is that, is there a way in which we can change that setup given the fact that we might have certain constraints when we're teaching in schools like this?
Yeah, I was thinking about that myself. I think there are people who found a work around that, in the sense you have now libraries in boxes where you can create class libraries. And that's one way of sort of creating the same sort of approach to learning and creating a space like that within classrooms or within a smaller cluster of classrooms. You have similarly, you have something like a tinker shed in a box, where you have all the resources that go into a tinker shed going into a small box, and that opens up and transforms the classroom learning space into a kind of tinker shed. I think what's really important is the intent behind the spaces. And if that is there, then one can find ways of working around the constraints.
Right. And I think even with Zainab's presentation, we did have a certain glimpse into the kind of possibilities that exist in a BMC school as well. And there was a question for Zainab, in fact, which was related to something which is her own experience, not just the presentation that she has made today, which was relating the way in which one could go about creating the environment for early childhood education as well.
Yeah. So, Rahi, I would also want to add to what Shikha, the question that Shikha was just asked about how do you do it in the mainstream with a government system where resources are constrained? Even in the question in the chat, I read about some people asking that, teacher staffing is an issue. So, I would just like to add over here a Muktangan's own experience, that one of the process that Muktangan strongly believes and follows is that we believe that our teachers are equal stakeholders in this entire process, and we develop them, empower them as being reflective practitioners. So every teacher, whether it's a preschool teacher, an ECE teacher, or a high grade teacher, the learning environment is just not the physical space. The teacher must know how to use it. I think that's very important. So constantly the teachers are observing the classroom, they're observing the children, they're reflecting, and they reflect on their own teaching practice. So I think even if resources are constrained, if a physical classroom space is a constraint, as an individual, as a human resource present in the classroom, a teacher can play a very, very crucial role. So what we have in Muktangan, we have daily planning meetings in the early years in the preschool classroom, and in the higher grade classrooms we have something called as a curriculum understanding, development, and design meetings. In these meetings, the teachers share their observations, what the students have shared, what the student were capable of achieving in the previous learning outcome. There's a constant feedback loop where something is planned, a learning experience is designed, is created, is offered to the children, and again if the children are not able to achieve, then again a new learning experience has been created. I think through these two major practices that Muktangan follows, we've been able to sort of address a resource constraint or any setback, like where there are more children and few teachers. I think we've also done in outreach projects as well, where the teacher child ratio is large, where one teacher is handling 50-55 plus students. So in these reflective meetings, what also happens is it's not only about the activities or the learning experience that the teacher is giving, also emphasis is laid upon creating the learning environment. So the sitting arrangement is discussed, whether it's a big group, it's a small group, individual activity. Then the layout is discussed, whether on the floor, on the table, on the chair. What are the resources that are required? How do you procure it? Again, accessibility, visibility of that. Whether it's going to be done indoor, outdoor, again, wherever the space is available. Again, if it's a space constrained classroom, so this is what the teacher can design and plan her lessons accordingly. And also another important thing is what I also spoke about, the documentation, the children's display. So it's not the teacher teaching and teachers got the materials, but students, their work, their charts, there are word walls in our classroom. Students' work has been put on display. All of this together creates a learning environment for a resource constrained classroom in the mainstream. And Rahi, just to address what you asked me about ECE, about early years, I think early years in the preschool, it allows us far much more flexibility in terms of the physical classroom layout. Also, within Muktangan and most preschools across the globe also recommend that there are no heavy, bulky furnitures. There are no fixed sitting arrangements. It's movable, it's flexible, it's open spaces. I think that is what it is. And I think ongoing teacher training is what is required, which will keep helping the teachers to think, reflect, and keep changing their learning space for the children.
Thank you so much, Zainab. We've almost come to the end of the webinar. I had a very short sort of question for Rashmi, which is also from one of the speakers. And it was just in terms of elaborating what she meant when she said something left unsaid.
Okay, so what I meant by that was, sometimes there is some key piece of information that if you give the child right away, they will make instant progress. But it is likely that, if they just think about it on their own for, say, 3 days or 4 days, they might come up with it themselves. So if you feel like, your help is going to stop the child from actually doing that work on their own and reflecting on that and achieving their own understanding, then leave it unsaid, because otherwise you're robbing them of that opportunity. Of course, you have to exercise some judgment here, because sometimes it may be something that they cannot come up with on their own, even if you give it 1 week, or if you think that it's going to frustrate them and stop them from learning, then by all means you have to give them that support. But whenever we give support, it has to be deliberate. Like, even that has to be pre-planned. It can't be something you do just as a default method. So think about what that support is going to do for the child and how it's going to affect that knowledge construction that we talked about. So that's all. I hope that clarifies what I mean.
Thank you so much, Rashmi. I would like to extend my heartfelt thanks to all the speakers of being here and being part of this Muktangan webinar. And I request Kiran to just say a few concluding remarks. Thank you.
Thank you, Rahi. Thank you. A big thank you to all the panel speakers. It was a wonderful discussion. And I was thinking about learning as a joyous experience where all the children look forward to come to the schools, to the learning spaces, and actively participate in the process of learning and not just the passive recipients. And all the speakers, all of you all spoke about the pedagogical and learning experiences that are very thoughtfully designed. They're not just random, or we are not just walking on the path of conventional education. And children are at the center, and each learner has agency to participate in what they are learning. So thank you, all the speakers. Thank you for all the participants who joined in for today's session. As I said, our panel has been very thoughtful, and even y'all are doing your work very thoughtfully, and that's why this curiosity gets you to attend such webinars. Thank you for participating. And I ask Shruti to take over from here.
Thank you once again to all our speakers for sharing such key insights. I think there are so many points for us to think about and reflect on. So I'm sure that this is only the beginning and this conversation will keep going on. Thank you so much, Kiran and Rahi, for facilitating this discussion. We thank all our participants for joining us in Zoom as well as YouTube Live. Uh, Please do stay tuned with us for the upcoming webinar as well. We request you to share your feedback using the link provided in the chat box, or you could also scan the QR code which was shared earlier. And we will be uploading the recording of this webinar on YouTube. So in case you would like to share it with others or view it again, it would be available. This is the second webinar of a three-part series. We had our first webinar on leadership, empowering communities for sustained school excellence, which is also available on our YouTube channel. So please do go view the first webinar as well. And do stay tuned for our upcoming webinar, which will be on assessments for school excellence and how do we actually work on our assessment practices and processes in light of fine-tuning pedagogy. This will be on the 18th of March, again from 3 to 4:30 p.m. And we will be sharing the details very soon. So do stay tuned with us. And we would love to keep in touch with all of you. So do write to us at contact@muktanganedu.org. You could visit our website to know more about our work. And please do follow us on social media, and also do share anything interesting that you are doing in your own organizations, because it will be a great source of learning for all of us as well. So do stay tuned and do keep in touch with all of us. Thank you once again.